Now I want to talk about how to create a daylight water hole deer hunting hotspot. You know, a lot of water holes I see, you know, people will say, well, I built that 1 acre pond, that half acre pond, that quarter acre pond for wildlife. When really, in a lot of small properties that I see, you're taking a lot of acreage that could otherwise be used for habitat or food away from habitat or food, and you're putting this water hole in there. And so not only are you decreasing the amount of space left over for quality habitat improvements, but you're also creating a wide open water hole that mature bucks especially don't want to use during the daylight. So it's pretty cool to put some pictures next to a pond and say, well, there's deer using it, or there's some does and fawns walking by. But you have to ask yourself in any hunting situation, anything you're doing, if you're hunting a hunting plot, kill plot, and you look at that food plot, can you imagine the oldest buck in the woods using that on a daily basis? If it's just a random pass through where you get a picture of him once a year, yeah, you might get lucky and be there when he's there. This is a pretty good water hole setup right here. Now, as most of you know, I'm a big fan of the 100, 110 gallon tank up to 150 gallon tank. I like that size because it offers precision, pinpoint, defined, mature buck use. It can be a part of their daily pattern, and you can put it into an area that's very tight, low risk, lots of cover, and you can really hide them. And that's what I like about those small water holes. We haven't had to fill them since 2016 at that 100 to 110 gallon size. I can say if we were at 50, 60 gallons, that wouldn't work out. And I've seen some that recommend 20 or 30 gallons online, and obviously they don't have a lot of experience with water holes, because if they did, they know that they'd have to fill them up sometimes in a hot October every 2 weeks, 10 days, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, and you just can't do that. And once deer take that water hole out of their daily pattern of use, I find that they don't come back for 2 or 3 weeks, even if you have it full, and really set back into that pattern. And a lot of times you just don't have 2 to 3 weeks to waste during the deer season. I like water holes that are hidden. This water hole is on the property that I'm purchasing, and we should be closing on that in a couple days. So I'm inheriting this water hole. I don't normally like water holes like this. They do increase the risk of EHD, but I need to check with the Minnesota DNR. I'm not saying that I'd fill this in, but a lot of times once you make a water hole like this, then it becomes a water source, water right away, and you can't fill it in, you can't alter it, you can't change it once it's created. I don't know if that's the case in the state of Minnesota, but bottom line is I believe this water hole is here to stay. It's been here for quite a while. And obviously I'm not going to go put a tank 50 yards away and try to get the deer to come there when they have this really nice water hole to play around. I like this because the banks are pretty shallow. A deer that is standing here can see out probably 80 yards in that direction, 50 yards up to the top. They can see down into the woods back here, 50 to 60, 70 yards. And so they can see out of here. They're not, I see water holes where a deer will go down to the bottom of that water hole and they can't see out, and they're just not going to use that. Deer, of course, are very wary of predators. They don't like putting themselves into a corner. It's a lot different with a bear bait, where a bear, you can put the logs in a V, put the bait there, and they'll come in at that perfect quarter and away shot for you. That's not the same as deer. You can't do that. So this water hole is pretty good. You know, I like the size. It's not overdoing it. I would just guesstimate that it's 20 feet by 10 feet, maybe 20 by 12. It's got a pretty decent berm on the back side here. It's also got a cut or a ditch in it to where it gets to about 6 inches deeper. It'll flow out the back side. It's pretty heavy clay that they've planted grass and clover around to limit the amount of mud and dried mud as it gets into EHD time towards the end of the summer. Fortunately, we don't have EHD around here very often at all, if ever. And so that's pretty low risk, but that's one of the main reasons that I don't like some of these ponds. They do spread the risk and increase the risk because of the mud of EHD. Just a side note, folks, you want mosquito-infested, stagnant, muddy water. That's what a water hole is. That's what deer like. Don't put fish in them. Don't put chemicals in to get rid of the mosquito. You're just going to create a situation where there's dead fish in there, and the deer do not want to drink that water. You don't want chemicals in there. You know you don't want to put a vitamin-filled type Kool-Aid. I've had a client, a friend do that, where it turned the water red. The deer immediately avoided it. Even though it was, quote, good for them, they avoided it. I think we can make this water hole a lot better. And when I said that about deer can see 50, 75 yards that way, 80 yards up there, 50 yards over here, is that necessarily a good thing? I don't think it is. I want those deer to come into a spot like this. You don't want them to just see 3 or 4 feet because again, they're not going to use it. But in a mixed ag area like this, you can have deer see 10, 20 yards in every direction, and they're safe with that. It becomes a really hidden and secure travel route for them during their daily cruising pattern. So what we're doing is we'll just go into the woods right here. We'll hinge cut just a little bit, just to give it a more softer feel. I wanted to get some of these trees down. There's some mature aspen in here, a little cluster right over here. So I'm gonna take those down. That's just a complete cut. And so I want that cut completely so we get regeneration from aspen. We're putting the logs and tops and debris on the ground for a little bit of structure right now. So I can do that on this side. This side out here is an old food plot. And you can imagine with the food plot they had planted there, they planted beans. The beans were gone in early October, so it wasn't a food plot at all. And it's just all open soil during the hunting season. So the water hole was it for attracting deer in this location because the food was gone. With that food up there, it represented a big open space, either to my left or behind my right shoulder up that way. It was all food plot and just big, wide open. All of that's going to be replaced in switchgrass. In fact, this 1.5 acre food plot that extends from over here up to the corner and around a little bit, that'll be replaced in all switchgrass. And what that'll do, instead of those bucks cruising in on that inner bench that's about 40 yards in and getting closer to the neighbor's property line, by putting switchgrass up here, getting some cuttings in here of aspen, getting some stems per acre and regeneration, I'm going to make this water hole seem a lot more secure to the rutting cruising bucks in the area, to the point where I'm going to make and grind out a trail that way. I want to grind out a trail up through that way through the switchgrass, and that'll lead right to a stand location that we just talked about, one of the first stands we're adding on the property. I have a big junk box elder out back here. I'll be able to take one of our extremely sturdy Family Traditions ladder stands, and we'll set that right behind me. And this is a water hole that, you know, it might get some summer use. I'm tempted to put a camera on it right now, but it really, water hole use does not heat up during the summertime. People think it would because they'll even have commercials where deer need to take a drink every day, and that is totally false. Just they're trying to get you to buy their brand of water hole. Deer do not need to take a drink of water every day. They do need moisture every day, and they get that during the summertime by the luscious alfalfa and soybeans around here and green vegetation, herbaceous growth, forbs and forages in the woods. That's what replenishes their daily moisture. They don't need to take a drink for weeks at a time. But when it gets into the rut, we always know when the pre-rut begins, because bucks will be on the prowl and they'll all of a sudden start hitting these water holes at 10 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, noon, 11, whatever it is. They're hitting it at an odd time because they're thirsty, because they're cruising. And from the end of October through early December, we'll see this water hole use really heat up. That's at a time when the green vegetation is dying, it's being harvested, the alfalfa's frosted out, and they really need moisture then. And that's why a lot of times when you get into the winter months, you find an open spring or an open spot in a river, and there'll be deer tracks everywhere because they're coming from a long ways away. They can't process snow the same way they do green vegetation, kind of like us. If we eat a bunch of snow, it doesn't necessarily replenish our moisture. So they'll hit water holes like this. So think about when they're hitting this the most. Right now during the summer, it doesn't really matter. They don't even care about cover too much. They'll probably hit this here and there. Think about though, during the rut, during the end of October, during November, during early December, when bucks crave that high stem count, dense cover, they crave that cover that they do not live during the summertime in. They completely different location from summer to fall. Think about their needs of cover during the fall. In this location, I really don't want them to see more than 20, 30 yards in any direction. So I'm going to cut the distance they can see in less than half from what it is right now. I'm going to do that with switchgrass surrounding here. I'm also going to plant some more clover around here and some shade tolerant grasses, almost like in a lawn, because I want to hold this bank better. And I want it to be more reclusive when the deer do get in here. I walked in here, it's just about halfway up my boots, maybe 1.5 feet high at the most in the middle. Nice and muddy. I know deer will love and bucks will love getting in here during the rut, and I'm going to make it a lot more secure for them to do so. We're going to hang that stand right there. We'll have a camera on here eventually if we don't stick it out today, but especially I expect deer to start hitting this to the highest degree all year long from October, end of October on. We see our water hole use pick up really good right in mid-October, especially when they start getting a lot more active towards the rut and getting a little bit ruddy. And so we're going to make this, to me, a lot more daylight location for a water hole. Now, if I'm adding water holes on this property, I'm going to add them in the form of 110 to 150 gallon, maybe 160 gallon tank at the most, because I like their ability to hold water, to be able to put into a very small location within cover, within travel patterns that are already there, say an upper bench of a hollow or an inside corner of woodlots where deer are already cruising anyways. We heat that up with a water hole, with a mock scrape. And you can bet if I have a camera around this location, this water hole, I'm gonna be hanging a mock scrape. I have a tree right over there that looks pretty good for camera. And if that is the spot for the camera, I'm probably gonna put a mock scrape under this branch on that flat right there, so that I can get the mock scrape, the water hole, and this backdrop all in the same picture. And you can bet that we're creating this situation so it becomes an even better daylight hotspot for deer hunting, rutting bucks when they're cruising in late October, November, and on this new Minnesota parcel that we're hunting and living on. You can bet I cannot wait to see these deer playing in this water, and we're gonna make sure that they're doing it at a higher percentage of time during the daylight hours.